Japan, 1 week later. Rescuers and survivors stood in silence today, marking exactly 7 days since that double disaster struck the country's northeast. Some 16,000 people are now listed dead or missing in the rubble. But elsewhere in Japan, there is little time for mourning. The desperate fight to bring the crisis at the Fukushima nuclear plant continues. Emergency crews are still working round the clock, risking their own lives to prevent a full-scale meltdown. And radiation levels continue to fluctuate in and around the plant. David Common is tracking the crisis for us from Tokyo and joins us now. So, David, what exactly is the situation right now at the Fukushima plant?
Well, Japanese nuclear authorities have now upped on the international scale of severity to a 5, the condition at those crippled nuclear plants inside those reactors. That's 5 out of 7. 7 is Chernobyl, 5 equivalent to the 1979 Three Mile Island accident. So it is still very concerning. It is still very precarious. They are continuing to pour water using fire trucks and other means onto those damaged reactor cores and also into that pool that is holding dozens of spent fuel rods. That's particularly concerning because we've seen radioactive fires starting in that area, and we do now understand that the pool itself may be damaged and leaking, and that presents a problem, obviously, trying to keep all of those fuel rods submerged in water, trying to keep them cool enough. This will be an ongoing problem. I mean, you think about the past 7 days since the earthquake and tsunami and the desperate, frantic efforts that have been taking place in there. They've thrown pretty well everything they've got at it, and they aren't that much closer to a permanent solution. We do understand from the United States, which flew an unmanned spy plane over top of these crippled plants, that they looked down and with sophisticated equipment took a look at the radiation levels, and they are convinced that at this point the radiation is still largely confined to that 30-kilometer radius area that's already been evacuated. So not a lot of concern about how much radiation there is outside, at least according to the Americans. Of course, the big issue that everybody's playing with is what happens if the situation gets worse. What if there are multiple meltdowns? What happens to the radiation? Where does it go? How far? In what doses? And what will that mean for people's immediate and long-term health, Nancy?
Absolutely. We'll definitely stay on that story and efforts to answer some of those key questions. What about Canadians fleeing the quake zone, David? What are we hearing about efforts just to get out of harm's way in some of the hardest hit areas?
Well, the Canadian government sent up a bus, Nancy, to pick up Canadians in the Sendai area. They are making a very long journey because they have to go all the way around those plants, give it a very wide berth. They're headed down to the Canadian Embassy here in Tokyo. We expect them in a couple of hours' time to arrive. Those are Canadians who were up in that devastated zone who now wanted to get out after the Canadian government suggested people leave certainly the area around that, around those reactors up to about an 80-kilometer radius. That's Canada's approach. But remember, the Brits are saying you should leave the entire area, including Tokyo, have been providing flights to afford people that opportunity. The Americans, a little more conservative. And, you know, here in Japan, a number of people that we've talked to still don't believe the official figures their government is putting out, are scared or frightened about what the consequences will be, particularly if this situation worsens.
Okay, all good to know. David, thanks very much for the very latest on all of this. David Common in Tokyo.